geldiniz. Bu akşam Erkek Derneği'nin Klinik Embriyoloji Derneği ile ortaklaşa yaptığı toplantılardan bir başkasına ev sahipliği yapıyoruz. Size bu toplantıya başlamadan önce genel birkaç konuda bilgi vermek istiyorum. Bunlardan ilki bildiğiniz gibi bu Covid-19 nedeniyle ülkemizde e, eğitim aksadı, günlük aktivitelerimiz aksadı. Ancak sanıyorum 1 Haziran itibariyle pek çok merkez hasta kabulüne başlayacak. Buradaki kısıtlama anladığım kadarıyla devlete ait merkezlerde devam edecek. Ben kendi üniversitemden sizlere örnek vereyim. 9 Eylül Üniversitesi Tıp Fakültesi Hastanesi bir pandemi hastanesi haline getirilmişti. Pandemi polikliniği ve pandemi kliniği haline. Pandemi polikliniğinde dahiliye branşlarının asistanları ve hocaları, pandemi servisinde de cerrahi branşların asistanları ve hocaları hizmet veriyorduk. Bu bağlamda bizim tüp bebek merkezimiz de kapatıldı. Hemşirelerimiz pandemi servisinde görevlendirildi. Halen de böyle devam ediyor. Geçtiğimiz 15 gün öncesinde hastane yavaş yavaş poliklinik hizmeti vermeye de başladı bir taraftan bu Covid pandemi hastanesi ötesinde. Saatte 2 hasta olacak şekilde polikliniklerde hasta alınmasına izin verildi. Biz hala tüp bebek merkezimizi açabilmiş durumda değiliz. Diğer meslektaşlarımın merkezleri nasıl çok bilmiyorum ama öğrenebildiğim kadarıyla kamuya ait merkezlerde henüz tüp bebek uygulamaları başlamadı. Ancak özel merkezler özellik arz eden hastalarına tedavilerine yavaş yavaş başlamaya, en azından konsültasyonlara başlamaya start verdiler. Bu bağlamda İzmir'deki özel merkezlerde 1 Haziran itibariyle çalışmaya başlamayan merkez kalmayacak bildiğim kadarıyla. Ankara ve İstanbul'da da benzer duyumlar alıyoruz. Bu günlerde biz Üreme Tıbbı ve Cerrahisi Derneği olarak bu internet ortamından eğitime devam etmeye çalıştık. Webinarlar yaptık ve bir de Sağlık Bakanlığı Bilim Kurulu'ndan bir konuşmacı davet ederek e, böyle bir webinarda bu işler nasıl yapılabilir bunları tartıştık ve arkasından da bir deklarasyon yayınlandı. Bizim dışımızdaki dernekler de aynı şekilde çabayı gösterdiler. Çünkü biliyoruz ki hastalarımızın bir kısmının bizlere ciddi talepleri var. Ama terazinin kefelerine e, sağlığı da koymak mecburiyetindeydik. Bu bağlamda bugüne kadar tüm meslektaşlarım gerekli hassasiyeti gösterdiler. Hepsine ben huzurlarınızda teşekkür ediyorum. Şimdi bu akşamki toplantımıza birazdan başlayacağız. Başlamadan önce ben size kısaca Stephane VIVILLE hakkında da biraz bilgi vermek istiyorum. Kendisi infertilite ve genetik konusundaki liderlerden birisidir. 2019 yılında geçtiğimiz yıl Antalya'da yaptığımız Üreme Tıbbı ve Cerrahisi Derneği'nin kongresinde kendisiyle beraber olmuştuk, ağırlamıştık ve bundan da onur duymuştuk. Bu akşam biraz önce söylediğim gibi Klinik Embriyoloji Derneği ile ortak yaptığımız bu webinarda kendisini dinlemeden önce size kısa bilgiler vermek istiyorum. Birincisi Profesör Viville, immünoloji konusunda PhD yaptıktan sonra postdoktoral olarak Cambridge'de genomik imprinting konusunda çalışıp ardından Fransa'ya dönmüş ve 1999'da Fransa'daki ilk PGD merkezini Strasbourg Üniversite Hastanesi'nde kurmuştur. Dolayısıyla bu konuda yeterince bilgi birikimine sahip bir otördür. Aynı zamanda ESHRE'nin Reproductive Genetics Special Interest grubunun da 2008-2011 yılları arasında koordinatör olarak çalışmıştır. Halen insan infertilitesi ile ilgili genler üzerinde özellikle 2016'dan beri çalışmakta. ve hem kadın hem erkek infertilitesinin genetik tanısı için 100'den fazla geni içeren paneli Strasbourg Üniversite Hastanesi'ndeki laboratuvarında uygulamaya sokmuştur. Biz gündüz kendisiyle bir ön görüşme yaptık bu webinarı hazırlarken. Buradaki panelde kaç tane gen olduğunu sordum. 100'den daha fazla olduğunu bu akşamki konuşmasında bizlerle paylaşacağını söyledi. Dolayısıyla ben zamanı iyi değerlendirebilmek açısından birazdan kendisini davet edeceğim. Bana bu konuda yardımcı olan arkadaşım Halil Russo da gördüğünüz gibi bizlerle beraber. Ben açılışı yaptıktan sonra konuşmanın bitiminde sizler sohbet kısmında sorularınızı ister İngilizce ister Türkçe yazın. Türkçe yazdığınız soruları Halil ve ben kendisine tercüme ederiz. İngilizce yazdıklarınızı kendisi İngilizce görür. Fransızca da yazabiliyorsanız Fransızca da yazabilirsiniz tabii. Ve şu anda kendisini davet edip zamanı başlatmak istiyorum müsaadelerinizle. Bienvenue Stephane. Je ne parle pas français, je préfère anglais. So I'd like to say welcome to our meeting. The stage is yours. You can start. Now it is your turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I appreciate it very much. I've been working with Turkey since very long, and in fact I should learn Turkish because I'm coming there very often. It has been a pleasure for a very long time. I have a colleague coming from Turkey, Özlem Ökütman, and I like to thank her because she's doing a great job in my lab. So I will start. Do you see my slide?
Yes, you can start. It's perfectly well.
I just reduce the sound a bit with this. Okay, thank you very much to all of you to be here tonight. I have divided my talk in two parts, a general consideration, which may be the more for you, clinician, biologist of IVF lab, the most difficult one, but I need to go through the techniques that we are using in the labs. And then I will have a second part, which is the specific consideration on the topic that we are developing tonight. So, first of all, I'd like to mention that many people doing IVF or medicine of reproduction do not consider that they are doing genetics. But in fact, you are doing genetics because you are helping people to have a baby. And then each time you have a baby, you have a genetic transmission from one generation to the other one, which is genetics. The genetics of infertility is, because of that, is a kind of paradox, because genetics will study the traits that are transmitted from one generation to the others, and fertility is the opposite. You don't have the transmission. So it's a kind of paradox to study the genetics of infertility. So I will start by a first slide with some take-home messages, and you will see there is others that we are coming. So you have to be aware that there is more and more genetics coming into your fields. Soon there will be no way to escape genetics when you see a couple coming to see you for an infertility problem. And so you know that for a long time, you know it's through the karyotype and for the male, for the Y microdeletion, but things are increasing, and there is an increasing list, and you will see with my presentation that this is going very fast, of a list of genes that are involved in male and female infertility. And then because of that, there is a new concept that you have to take care of. It's the infertility genes. This is quite new in our field, but we have to be aware, and we will have to work with that. So since the mid of 90s, this gene numbers is increasing very fast, and this slide illustrates that. And you can see here, I don't know, can you see my arrow when I move the arrow on the screen? I don't hear, but let's say we see. So in blue here, Okay, here we have the number of monogenic causes of infertility. And as you can see, since the mid-90s, this is increasing very, very fast, and which is very interesting for our talk tonight. So, why is there such an increase? I think there is mainly two reasons. The first one probably comes from the development of PGD. Indeed, before PGD, the genetic field was not so much interesting by the reproduction, the biology of reproduction and the IVF. And since the development of PGD, there is geneticists in the labs, in the IVF lab, or at least interact with IVF lab. And a good geneticist will always ask, okay, there is a problem here, a fertility problem. Is there a genetic cause? And then he will start to look for that, to start some research to find some genes. So that I think is one point and is interesting. And the other causes is the technology that has evolved very quickly, and I will mention that later on, and also the cost of this technology, which is going down. One of the main technologies that we are using now is what most of you knows as the next generation sequencing technology, which is also called most of the time deep sequencing or high throughput sequencing. And personally, I do prefer high throughput sequencing. So most of the time you will hear from me high throughput sequencing. But all these names are for the same technology, which help to sequence very quickly a large amount of DNA and a large amount eventually of patients at the same time. So here you see also the evolution of this next generation sequencing, the high throughput sequencing, which really started in the early 21 centuries, and is really going up, and the old-fashioned sequencing is diminishing drastically. So now everyone doing research and genetic diagnostic are using the next generation sequencing. So this is just to quickly illustrate the cost. As you can see, it has really dropped, and we find back this 2010 date where the cost is minimal and is not going down very much more actually. So this cost means that everyone can afford it. It's easy to get some DNA, and this DNA can be sent to a private company, mainly in the States, but everywhere now, almost everywhere now, and you just pay for it. But unfortunately, it's not only a question of cost, and I will try to illustrate that with the following part of my presentation. So I'd like now to show you how we do proceed in my lab, for example, or in any lab wanted to identify genes involved in non-syndromic genetics of infertility. And I insist on the fact on non-syndromic. I think it is important because most of the time when it is syndromic, the fertility is not the main problem, and people are not looking so much for that fertility. So identifying a gene, it's a long pathway, and the first thing is recruitment of the patients, and this recruitment of the patient is done in collaboration with us, but by clinicians that are seeing this patient, and it's a crucial step, and I will insist on that. Then there is a DNA. As soon as you have recruited the patient, you take the samples, which can be saliva or blood, and then you prepare the DNA, you do the library, and I will mention that briefly again later on, and you do sequencing part. Then comes the most difficult part, which is the computational analysis and the validation, the biological validation of the data that you have found. And as I say, this middle part, the DNA preparation, DNA library preparation, and the sequencing can be done by any commercial company. These are the critical step for me, and the first one, medical doctor, biologist in IVF lab can help to recruit this patient. You have to realize if you send the DNA to a company, they may propose to do some computational analysis, but they will not know your field, they will not know what are the patient, so most of the time it's not done properly. So you should consider that no one will do the computational analysis for you, and you need a specific competencies to do this step. So this is very crucial. So patient recruitment, which I think is a very important point, and you should be very careful of what I'm saying now, because you may eventually can participate to this type of work via the recruitment of patients. So the recruitment will depend on the initial hypothesis, on the mode of transmission that you are looking for, which can be dominant or recessive. For dominant ones, they are very rare, and in fact they need an accident during the parent gametogenesis. So, and for this purpose, you need to recruit trio. The trio meaning the parents, both mother and father, plus the infertile patient. And you will look for new mutation in this patient which are not present in the parent's DNA, which may explain the infertility of the patient. There's only very few examples of dominant disease so far in infertility. The main reason of that is that it's a dead end. It means that an infertile patient will not transmit the mutation if it is dominant. For the recessive cases, which is more likely because the carrier will not suffer from infertility and the mutation will be transmitted by both parents. In the dominant cases, dominant transmission mode, only one parent will transmit the mutation, and the parent has to carry the disease by himself or herself. And in recessive mode, both parents are carrier of the mutation, but they are not showing any phenotype. They are fertile. But when the kids, the boy or the girl, have the two mutations, they may be infertile. So if I will focus on the recessive mode, so we can start working with a group of patients originating from a small, isolated geographic area. And then the mutation is going around in the area, and sometimes some weddings that are bringing back together this mutation. But we are mainly working with consanguineous family, and in this case we can either work on a couple of families, 2, 3, 4 families, small family, where the patient, the affected patient, are showing the same spermiogram alteration, which is not always easy to say that they are strictly the same one. And the best one will be to work on a large family, and I will mention this family later on, where there is more than 2, 3 brothers, affected brothers, and if possible non-affected brothers, so we can compare them, we can compare the DNA of them and find out where is the mutation causing the infertility. So if we resume this, I show you the facility with which we can identify a gene according to the type of patient that we have. Here, on the left, we have group of patients. So there is only few genes that have been identified so far with this type of studies, either from the restricted area, and then we have at least 10 patients, or not from a restricted area, but then we need much more patients, about 100, 200 patients, to hope to find common mutation in these patients. And if we have many families, you see that again there is much more genes that have been identified with consanguineous families of small size. And then with the large family, where for the moment is the most efficient way to recruit patients and to identify genes. So just a technical point, how we proceed to the sequencing. We can choose to sequence all the genome, the whole genome, which represents 3 billion of base pairs, which is actually still very, very difficult to analyze and then to identify mutations. The preferred approach strategies is to sequence the whole exome, which means to sequence the coding part of the genome. This coding part of the genome represents about 2% of the genome, which is about 60 million of base pairs. And because this 60 million of base pairs is much easier to analyze than the 3 billion of the whole genome. And we also know that about 80 to 85% of the mutations that have been identified so far has been identified in the coding part of the genome. So it's a good approach to start with and to try to identify new genes. So how do you proceed? You have your DNA from the patient that you have been recruiting. You prepare a library. If you want to sequence the whole genome, you will sequence directly this library. If you want to sequence only the coding part of the genome, you have to trap the exon. The exon are the part of the genome, the genes that are coding. So to trap them by different techniques that I will not explain tonight, and then you sequence that this trapped exon, so allowing you to sequence all the coding part of the genome. And then comes the most difficult part, which is the computational analysis and the biological validation of this mutation. And I will come back later on. The computational analysis, to show you how difficult it can be. If I take this family where I have two patients, S1 and S2, which are infertile, and a brother, which is fertile, the two parents. So if I sequence these three patients, I will end up with in total with 132,000 variation altogether. So because there is a consanguinity in the parents, we are looking for homozygote mutations that will affect these two brothers. So that will already eliminate quite a lot of this variant. So if we are looking for all the variant homozygote for each of the patients, so we have about 35,000 variants homozygote for each of them. And then we can start to compare them, because we are looking for a mutation that is common on these two brothers, affected brothers, but which will be absent for this one. So this, already comparing the two affected one, will reduce about 10,000 of variants, which is still far too much to be analyzed properly. And then if we compare with the non-affected brothers, we drop drastically to 6,000, which is still quite a lot, and we still have quite a lot of work to do. Then we look the publicly available database, and we are looking for very rare variants, because if they are very common, it would mean they are probably not responsible for this pathology, for this infertility. So if we look for the first genomic database, we got 1,000 variants. So from then we can compare to another one. So this is the frequency, the limit that we want to check. And we end up with 294 variants, which is still a lot, but now we can start to work with it much more easily. So we can then analyze the type of variant. Some variant will not affect the coding sequence, and some will affect the coding sequence, and more or less drastically. So we look for that, and there is system to check if the variant can be causing or not the pathology. And doing that, we end up with 18 variants. And from these variants, we can decide to do some further work, studying the expression, for example, and different things. So that's where starts the biological validation. So in terms of biological validation, one of the first things you should do is check the expression. If the gene showing the variation, showing a variation, is not expressed in the testes, you can stop to think about it. It's a bad candidate. But if it is expressed in the testes, and eventually if it is expressed in the testes plus other tissues, it can be a good candidate. Then one good way to validate a variant is to find the same mutation or mutation in the same gene in other patients showing the same infertility phenotype. This is a good way to find out if the variant is indeed the cause of the pathology that you are studying. which means you need to have a lot of patients showing the same pathology. Then you can go a step further, which will increase the convincing step, is to create a mutant animal of the gene that you have identified. And for that, you can study different type of models. It depends on the evolution conservation of the gene. And if it is very well conserved, and if it is conserved, for example, in the yeast, you can work with the yeast. The interest of the yeast is that it's going very fast and it doesn't cost too much. One of the limitations is that you will have a hard time to find people that will be interesting to work on your gene that are working on yeast also. Then you can go to Drosophila, to the zebrafish, and the best one is certainly the mouse model, where you can introduce also a mutation and work and study the effect of the mutation in the mouse and see if it has the same phenotype than the one we have seen in human. This is a very convincing argument to show that the variant that you have identified is indeed the cause of the phenotype that you are looking for. So that I will switch. So where are we actually? There is a very good paper that has been published last year with one of our collaborators, and she did a very good work. She has been working very hard, and she has been looking for all the publication dealing with the genetic assessment of male infertility. And she has screened that and sorts all these papers according to 6 criteria, which are here. The one for which the data are definitive, and yes, this gene is certainly involved in the phenotype described. Strong argument, moderate, limited, no evidence, and not evaluated. So in total, she screened 23,000, more than 23,000 publications for a total of 521 genes, and she found definitive, strong, moderate argument only in 185. And if you are not so conservative and if you consider that the moderate should be eliminated, it's only 92. So less than 1/5 of the genes that have been identified so far. So you see there is still quite a lot of work to do, and I will come back to this slide later on also. So the first take-home messages after this first part is that genetic infertility is a very recent field, as you have seen, and but take the advantages of very powerful tools. The high throughput sequencing is really helping a lot to identify new genes. So the curve of the number of genes will increase even more very quickly. As I say, everyone can sequence. I have met many people, especially from the East, Middle East, when I was soliciting them to collaborate. They, oh yeah, we are sequencing, there is no problem. But then I asked, well, yeah, okay, you are sequencing, but what are the results? And they don't have results, because the main problem is that they're sending the DNA and no one is doing the computational analysis for them, and they don't know how to do it. So that's a shame. And so this is to say, to insist that there is a need to have competency to the analysis of this data. There is a difficulties to recruit interesting families, interesting patients, and that it's a kind of call for me for you. If you are interested, we can discuss about that. And you need, in order to be able to find a gene, you need to have very strict criteria for the patient enrollment. It is very important that we have strict criteria, otherwise there is a mixture of phenotype and it's very confusing and we cannot identify the genes that are involved. So we are now at the point where we have a balance between the diagnosis and the research. What we do as a diagnostic is also will be kind of research showing that indeed the genes that we have identified are also involved, and at which level they are involved in this pathology and in this phenotype. So I think personally, but maybe I'm not I'm not the best one to say that. I think it's for us, for the reproduction field, it's a revolution that is coming out. And so I invite you to don't miss this new activity in your lab. So now I will come to specific consideration. I will show you two examples of genes that we have identified in my lab, and then I will show you a pathway, a workflow that should be used for male patient. I could have done for female patient also, but I've been asked for male, for how to deal with patient, the genetic part of the patient coming to see you in your clinic. I will start with an example of teratosospermia, and more exactly on globosospermia. And so, as most of you know, globosospermia is a very well characterized teratosospermia, and it's a very rare incidence. It's a round head spermatozoa without acrosome. And so far there is two genes that have been identified, and both of them have been identified in my lab, SPATA16 and DPY19L2, and I will insist on DPY19L2 because most of the patients with globosospermia have a mutation in DPY19L2. So we have been lucky enough to be access to this Jordanian family with a consanguineous, which is a consanguineous family. These two the two parents are cousins, first-degree cousins. They have 5 affected boys plus 3 non-affected ones. All of them, except this one, has accepted to participate to this study. And I don't have time to show you how we identify the gene technically, but it turned out that we identified DP119L2, and DP119L2 is surrounded by 2 sequences that we call SCR 1 and 2, which are almost identical. And because they are almost identical, they can recombine together. And because they are recombined together, it happens that the genes which is between these 2 sequences is deleted. And these globosospermic brothers are showing a deletion of an homozygote deletion. Both alleles of the gene are deleted, an homozygote deletion of DPY19L2. And we have been carrying on quite a lot of work on this gene and recruited a very large cohort of globosospermic patients, and we've shown that almost 75% of these patients are showing an alteration in DPY19L2. Not all of them have the homozygote deletion. Most of them, 55% of them, are homozygote deleted for this, but some of them are showing a deletion of one of the allele and a point mutation on the second allele. And about 10% are, sorry, I'm wrong with the color, 8% are heterozygote, showing a heterozygote deletion plus a mutation, 10% a homozygote mutation, point mutation, and for 20%, 26% of these patients, we didn't find any mutation. Then there is this second gene that I just mentioned before, SPATA16, and we have identified, screening this patient, we have identified 2 patients showing a mutation, a deletion in fact, in this gene, so which represent about 3%, but the number should be increased. So we went further with this to study this DP119L2 because it was clear that if you inject a globosospermic sperm by ICSI into an egg, there is no fertilization. And we could show, but I will not go to the detail because of lack of time. We could show that if you associate this ICSI procedure with an artificial oocyte activation, you get a good fertilization rate, and having a good fertilization rate, you get a good pregnancy rate, which is very similar to what you have in ICSI in general. So at the end, we have done the largest genetic study on human globosospermia. We show that DP119L2 is the major gene of globosospermia because of the specific genomic structure. We have defined, because of that, we have been able to define diagnosis strategy, but also a strategy for the treatment of this patient, and analysis that the artificial oocyte activation will restore the fertility of this patient, which is quite logical because the factor responsible for this fertilization is PLC zeta. PLC zeta is localized in the acrosome. So if you don't have acrosome, you don't have PLC zeta. So the artificial oocyte activation will replace this lack of PLC zeta. So now I'd like to show you another example which concerns the spermatogenetic failure. And in this term, we include the non-obstructive azoospermia and the severe oligospermia, knowing that some of these severe oligospermia will evolve to non-obstructive azoospermia. So you know that most of you, the non-obstructive azoospermia, you can have it's a complete absence of spermatozoa in the ejaculate. And we can divide the two types, which is the maturation arrest. The spermatogonia are not able to go through all the spermatogenesis, and the complete absence of spermatogenic stem cells, which is called also the Sertoli cell only syndrome. So for the severe oligospermia, which is defined as less than 5 million sperm per milliliters of the ejaculate, if there is still some spermatozoa, ICSI treatment is completely appropriate. It's working very well, but it can be interesting to offer to this patient also a cryopreservation in case spermatogenesis will decrease with time. So we have been studying this family, which is a Turkish consanguineous family, with 5 in total brothers, 3 infertile one, 2 with the 2 older brothers with non-obstructive azoospermia, and this brother with oligospermia, severe oligospermia. This brother is fertile. And these 2 brothers are fertile, and these younger brothers, we don't know his fertility status, for the moment at least. So there is 6 brothers, I say, 2 infertile, 2 fertile, 1 of unknown status. The 2 infertile brothers were diagnosed as Noah, and the 3rd one with severe oligospermia. And this brother has become with time azoospermic. So also it's interesting to know that all 3 affected brothers are presenting a drastic testicular size reduction of about 50%. And the histopathology of the index patient, one of the older one with Noah, is showing a maturation arrest at the primary spermatocyte stage. So we perform whole exome sequencing of the 2 infertile brothers, the 2 older one, and we filter out. We do all the computational analysis that I showed you before, and according to the different criteria I mentioned before, and at the end we identify one gene, TEX15. And TEX15 in this case is showing a stop mutation, which is already very convincing. It's a drastic mutation, a stop mutation, and this mutation segregates with the infertility phenotype. So we check all the brothers and the parents. All the affected brothers are mutated for this gene. They are homozygote for that. And the parents are heterozygote as well as the 2 fertile brothers. So both of these fertile brothers have a Y-type allele. Interestingly, the youngest brothers, we give the consentement to that we analyze his DNA, is also homozygote for the mutation, and I think I will come back to that soon. So, as I mentioned, so we have here the computational analysis. We need a validation, the functional validation, And in fact, it turned out that in the literature, we could find out the knockout of this gene, the mouse knockout of this gene. And it does show a very similar phenotype than the patient that we have been analyzing. It's a drastic reduction of the size of the testis, as you can see here. Here is a normal testis, and here is a mutated mouse testis. And they also show an early meiotic arrest during the spermatogenesis. So this is very convincing that the mutation we have found is indeed responsible for the phenotype we are analyzing. So I could go on with different examples. I will not do that, but I just wanted to mention again that this validation is very important to be sure that the mutation you have found out is indeed responsible for the phenotype. And starting from this number, we in Strasbourg have set up a panel of genes to be analyzed, and we choose the genes that we are convinced that are indeed involved in infertility. So at the moment, this is also a take-home message. At the moment, there is 4 groups of gene tests that are available for your infertile patient, which are the conventional karyotype, the chromosome Y microdeletion, the mutation of some specific gene of syndromic infertility, and here I'm thinking of cystic fibrosis. One of the most benign forms of cystic fibrosis is the congenital bilateral absence of vas deferens, and you must have seen already patients in this category. And now there is specific gene for non-syndromic infertility, and I'd like to insist on that. So this new concept of infertility gene, and it's important to start to screen. And I will now show you some clinical aspect and some workflow that can be used. I like to illustrate the rest of my talk with this. I needed some mail, and so I illustrated from this movie. Some of you may have seen it, which is Reservoir Dogs, which has been directed by Quentin Tarantino a long time ago. And I love the music, so if you are interested, you can even listen to it. So this film is about a gang of gangsters that want to rob a bank, and they don't know each other, so they give them a surname. And this is Mr. Brown, and Mr. Brown is not so pleased with his name because it's linked to shit, so he doesn't like it, but he doesn't have to say anything. So Mr. Brown his Siemens analysis is revealing an azoospermia. The karyotype is normal, and an examination, a closer examination, shows that he has a congenital bilateral absence of vas deferens. So for this patient, the first thing to do is to screen for CFTR mutation. So either you find mutation or not. If you find it, you have to screen the spools also, because there's a risk for the kids that they may develop a cystic fibrosis, which can be more dramatic than the one that the father is doing. And if the spools has a mutation, there is a need for genetic counseling, and it will be interesting to offer either a prenatal diagnosis, but as this patient will need IVF, it will be interesting to carry on a PGD. If there is no mutation, there is recently a second gene that has been identified with this phenotype, which is the ADGRG2. And then again, you can screen for mutation with this gene. And if there is a mutation, there is a genetic counseling, but there is not so much problem to take care of this patient. Mr. Pink doesn't like his surname neither, because he thinks it's a gay surname and he's not gay, whatever. This guy is suffering from a non-obstructive azoospermia. The karyotype is normal, so the first thing to do is the karyotype. The microdeletion, there is no microdeletion of the Y chromosome, and then you can start to think to screen for the infertility panel that I will show you later on. So far, we didn't, like for globospermia, we didn't identify a predominant gene in this phenotype. So there is all of the genes that have been identified need to be screened at the same time. Mr. White, who doesn't complain about his surname, is suffering from severe oligospermia. He has a normal karyotype, he has a normal malcondition of the Y chromosome. I didn't take time to re-mention the Y chromosome, but if you have questions, I would be pleased to answer about the Y chromosome. Then again, there is a lot of genes that have been identified that can be screened through the infertility panel. And I'd like to mention again text 15 because I think it's a good example of what we can do. If a patient has a text 15 mutation, either he already reached the azoospermia or he didn't. If he didn't, you should offer him a cryopreservation as soon as possible to don't end up with azoospermia, but you can also treat it with fresh sperm. But then it would be very interesting to screen his brothers, and I'll show you the family. The youngest brother, who doesn't have any parental project yet, may still have some spermatozoa. So it would be interesting, even if he doesn't have a parental project, to offer him a cryopreservation. It's easy to do the test, it's easy to do the cryopreservation, and it doesn't cost too much especially compared to what can be the result before, because if this guy is coming back to you, I don't know, 5 years or in 10 years, and if he doesn't have any more spermatozoa, it will be very bad, and he can do something against you, saying, why you didn't offer me a cryopreservation at the right time? So I think this is part of the clinical aspect of the interest of the work we are carrying on. Mr. Brown has a phenotype showing that at least 70% of his spermatozoa are showing microcephalia and associated with multiple flagella. One gene has been clearly identified in this case, which is the OPC gene. There is 2 mutations that have been identified, one from the North African population and one in the European population. And in the first mutation, it has been shown that all the spermatozoa has a tetraploid content of DNA. All spermatozoa, this macrocephaly, this very big head spermatozoa, has 4 times the content of DNA instead of 1. And unfortunately, for these patients, there is nothing that you can do with their sperm, and the only thing that can be done, if it is possible, is gamete donation or adoption. And this has not been studied with the second mutation, but it's pretty sure it will be the same because it explains the site of the head of the sperm. Mr. Blue has a total globosospermia, and I show you that the first things to screen is TP192 and then SPATA16. And interestingly, there is a solution here also, which is the acetyl oocyte activation. So little and little, we are going to be able to personalize the medicine that we are offering to these patients because of the work that is done in genetics. Mr. Orange is showing a teratosospermia with multiple anomalies of the flagella, the MAF syndrome. And here the list of genes is increasing very, very quickly, and there is it's becoming very well documented because approximately, actually, the genes that have been identified are mutated in 60% of these patients, which is already a lot, much more than what we have for the moment for azoospermia or severe oligospermia. So, if you want to find back what I have said tonight as a way to take care of this patient, we have wrote with Özlem this review in JARG last year, so I invite you to the one which are interesting. But to summarize what is in this paper, there is this workflow that we are presenting in this paper. So you have to examine the patient coming. There is the first step, of course, it's the Siemens analysis, which has to be done at least 2 times. And then according to the phenotype, you see you have different ways to deal with this patient. If it is an obstructive azoospermia with CBAVD, I told you there is this gene, CFTR, and this ADGR2. Non-obstructive azoospermia or severe oligospermia, there is a karyotype to be done. If there is no anomaly in the karyotype, the Y microdeletion is the second step, and then if there is no microdeletion, you can offer to this patient the panel of gene. And this panel of gene can be also offered to patients with teratospermia or atenospermia. So, I'm almost finished. I hope you are not too tired now. And so at the end, we work from bench to bedside. We are doing some basic research and going up to the diagnostic and to offer new treatment to some of our patients. So this analysis, the genetic analysis, may help to establish a prognosis of success, for example, of the disease and fertilization of the pregnancies. It may help to establish a risk that there is to perform, to offer IVF to this patient, and eventually to do something to avoid this risk, for example, some new investigation or offering, as we show for CFTR, PGD. But it also can help to take care of the rest of the family and to have some specific personalized care for this family and for the brothers of the patient that has come to see you. For example, to take care of the preservation of the fertility of some of the brothers. So, at the Strasbourg Hospital, we have set up a new offer in terms of diagnosis, genetic diagnosis, and we started this activity not so long ago, in 2016, and the first panel of genes we had was comprised 16 genes. This one evolved in 2 years later and with 51 genes, and now we are offering a new panel, recently new panel, with almost 140 genes. And these genes are distributed between male and female. It's interesting to note that there is not so many genes so far in common between male and female and fertility, but that could be another presentation. So in male we have 110 genes, and if we check the spermatogenic failure, including azoospermia and severe oligospermia, we have 74 genes, and I'll let you read the rest. I don't think I need to go through all of them, just to show you that there is quite a lot of genes now. It's becoming very impressive. And in the female, which is a quite new activity in terms of research and diagnosis for us, we have 33 genes, mainly most of them in primary ovarian failure, but also in new phenotype like oocyte maturation defect, spontaneous ovarian hyperstimulation, and early embryogenic arrest. And 3 of the genes have been identified in my group. So I like to thank the people working directly with me or in collaboration, and especially I like to thank Özlem Kutman, who is working with me for a very long time, and I'm very pleased to have with me. And as you can see, we have a lot of Turkish collaborators and others also from France. So if you'd like to go deeper, I invite you to read this review article on the way how to take care of male infertility, the genetic parts. It will explain you what I've told you tonight. And for the one which are wanted to go even deeper, we have edited this book with my colleague from Belgium, Karen Sermon, in 2014, and we are in the way to do the second edition of this book. So I'd like to thank you very much, and to thank you very much for this invitation and giving me the opportunity to present you our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephane, for the lovely talk. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me well? Okay. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive and informative lecture. I loved the Reservoir Dogs references, by the way. It's on the review as well. I loved it then, and I love it now. I will announce the session now to be open for questions, and I will come back to you with some add-ups and the first question. Değerli katılımcılar, oturum şu an itibariyle sorularınıza açıktır. Sorularınızı yazabilirsiniz. While my colleagues are typing up their questions, I'd like to add some things and, of course, followed by a question for you. The field of genetics coupled with bioinformatics is a huge field at the moment with unlimited possibilities in my eyes. For example, it can come to research on fertility disorders as well as contraception techniques, which is, I'm also interested in it since I was working with Christopher Barra to develop a male contraceptive pill. And the main thing that we were doing there was looking for specific proteins to be expressed in sperm. And the biggest candidate was Catsper, which I also know that they are involved with asthenospermia. But since in some cases of genetic defects, there might be no phenotypically observable trait in the ejaculated sperm, most of the cases we have to rely on specific machinery or maybe molecular techniques to identify defects in cat spurs. I know that in the literature they may be coupled with deafness in cat spur 1 mutations probably, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if I am. So what would you suggest for us andrologists or embryologists to look for when we are performing semen analysis to identify that might be missed during our routine analysis?
It's a tricky question. Thank you. The diagnostic tool, and it's a problem for us looking for new genes. The diagnostic tools are in our field are not that good, and if I would rather, because it's more my field, if I take the azoospermia, there is probably about 2,000 genes that could be involved in azoospermia. So by seeing an azoospermia, you don't know really, you are far to know the cause of the etiology of this azoospermia. And that can be, so I have been mentioning the genetics, but genetics is not all. Huh? Genetics, we think, but it's still an hypothesis, that about 20 to 30% of the infertility will be due to a genetic cause, which means it's remaining 80 to 30 to 70%, which are not due to genetics and can be due, and we know that, to environment causes. But you can also have a combination of both environment and the genetic susceptibility to these environment clues. So, in terms of the diagnostic tools that we have, they are quite poor for the moment. And we cannot exclude that the genetics, if it turns out that indeed about 30% of our patients have a genetic cause, it's possible that one day, because of the price will go low enough, that we can directly propose, almost without doing a diagnostic, we can almost propose a genetic analysis to this patient. And this genetic analysis may tell us what is the etiology, and may tell us what we should do or what we can do for this patient. I hope I did answer to your question.
No, that was great. That was great. Thank you very much. So we have one question. Are the commercially available gene panel tests cost-effective?
Yeah, I can read this question. Thank you for asking this question and to ask it in English. But as I think Ali told you, if you would like to ask question in Turkish, he will translate the question. Unfortunately, I cannot understand Turkish. So to this question, I can first ask. I could answer by a question. What is effective? Does the cost? I would answer the cost. The cost is about 500 euros. Okay, for 500 euros, we can analyze the panel of genes. We are also offering, but as many, the microdeletion, Y chromosome microdeletion for about 150 euros or 100 euros. That has to be checked, whatever. So for the panel analysis is 500 euros. But is it effective? You will have to tell me. But if you have a patient, I take the example of text 15. You have a patient, you find out a mutation in text 15, you know what to do, you know what to offer to him, and you know that it can be, if it still has some sperm, it is urgent to offer him a cryopreservation, but to him and eventually to his brothers, if he has brothers. So that makes the test, for me, that makes the test cost effective. That is the reason why I think it is cost effective. I hope I did answer your question.
Yes, that's okay. Should we proceed to the next question? The next question is about epigenetics and its role in gametogenetics.
Yes. Yeah, it's a tricky question also. For the moment, there are only few works and not that many serious work on the epigenetic analysis of the DNA of the spermatozoa directly. Okay, and epigenetics is a very new field. I've been doing my postdoc on epigenetic and more precisely on imprinting, genomic imprinting. And so it's a very recent field, and there is still a lot that we do not know, and we do not know what is the normal epigenetic profile of a spermatozoa. So carry on epigenetic analysis of the spermatozoa DNA is not relevant actually today. It may become one day, but for the moment is not. So, but because of this epigenetic analysis, this is meaning that you could have epigenetic malformation of the babies at the baby level, and that is something that has been seen. There is not that many so far, and is quite limited. We know that it is increase in case of IVF, and especially with, but not only with oligospermic patient. And that is only some epidemiological studies that can be can answer your question. But it can be also very tricky. It's very tricky to study. It's very tricky to study, and I hope I will be clear in my explanation, because the embryos is a composition composed of the maternal DNA and the paternal DNA. And if one of them is infertile because of an epigenetic anomalies, this can be transmitted to the embryo. Okay, but it's only one hit. There will be one mutation, epigenetic mutation, and not the other one. And so that can never give any phenotype. But during the life, and you can have a second accident, a second hit on the normal allele, okay, and then the phenotype can develop. But the problem is that this second hit, the second accident, can take place at any time, can take place at 5 years old, 10 years, 20, 60, okay, and also it can take in one specific tissue. So you can have a phenotype that develop because of this initial epigenetic anomalies that can develop at different time and in different tissue. So it's a nightmare to study. Epidemiologically, it's a nightmare to study. So I think it's it's a point, it's an interesting point, but very, very difficult to study. So actually, at least.
Thank you, Stephane. Following up on that, there's another question about epigenetics and its effect on male infertility. What is the most common epigenetic factor on male infertility, as in your opinion?
I think that, well, yeah, let's answer to this one, because there is a question also on fragmentation. So epigenetics is everything that affects the DNA without affecting its sequence, okay? And that can be, most of the time, is methylation. But it can be also some histone modification, histone composition, histone modification. And so far, we have no clue on one specific epigenetic mutation that would predominate in infertility, in male infertility. There is some data showing that the methylation of oligospermic, severe oligospermic patient is affected, but we don't know if it is affected because the patient is infertile, or if the patient is infertile because its methylation is going wrong. Okay, we don't know what is the cause and the effect on both sides, and this still needs to be. It's very interesting to take questions. It's a very interesting field, and I hope that there will be some work on that, but for the moment we don't have a clue on that. There is still a lot of work to go on.
Thank you. Can we just go back to the question about DNA fragmentation tests? Do you think they are beneficial? I didn't catch what you said previously about that question, but I'm just going to repeat it.
I'm part of these people that are very concerned, like with my friend Joyce Harper, which are very concerned of what we call the adds-on, all the techniques that are added to the classical IVF treatment, and most of them, if it is not all of them, but most of them have not been proven to be efficient. And this is the case for DNA fragmentation. There is not any study properly done that are showing that testing for DNA fragmentation is bringing anything. So I don't think, so far, I'd like to have a proper study in order to be able to answer properly to your question. But there is so many people that are working with DNA fragmentation that I think if it would bring something, some benefits, we should know it for now.
I strongly agree with you. I think the test itself may induce DNA fragmentation and then detect it afterwards. So the result is a question, basically. The next question is, there might be some link and predisposition to cancer and severe male factor infertility. Does your panel include some tumor suppressor genes or DNA repair pathways?
It's an interesting question, and no, so far no. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we are focusing on non-syndromic fertility, because our goal is to dedicate our activity to IVF lab, and for most, if not all, patients that are coming to visit you, they don't show any other phenotype, and if they do, they will first consult a specialist of their pathology before thinking to go to the infertility, and they may never have a reproduction project for themselves because of the pathologies that they are suffering. So the question is, no, we don't have any DNA repair pathway genes. Having said that, and I'm thinking at the same time, it's true that for many of the genes that are identified so far, and most of them in our panel, we don't know the exact function of this gene. So I cannot exclude that among the genes that we have in our panel, some of them are somehow involved in the DNA repair pathway.
Thank you very much. The next question is from our loved moderator. So, Professor Bülent Gülekli, would you like to ask the question, or should I continue? I think I will continue then.
But maybe but there is a question, so maybe I could answer the question.
Sure. Yes.
So maybe say the question, because the audience may not see the question.
I should ask you, sir. I didn't catch that. There was a bit.
Maybe you should give you should repeat or read the question to the audience so they know what we are speaking about.
Yes, of course. How long have you been working on female genetic infertility? And I would like to hear a few more about this issue, about the female side of the genetics, infertility genetics, let's say.
So again, I will answer by a question. Do I have an hour? No, I will give a short answer. We have been working on female genetic of infertility since 3 or 4 years. And the reason why we didn't work before is that it's much more complicated to have a diagnostic, a phenotype. So it's only recently that we have been starting. And I have to thank many of your colleagues in Turkey that have providing us some families, some very interesting families, especially with the hyperstimulation syndrome, the spontaneous hyperstimulation syndrome, where we have identified a gene that we are still working on. We are doing the biological validation, which is not that easy. And so it's not that long, and it's mainly due to the quality of the phenotype that you have with female, which is much more difficult. We are working with patients that are having ovarian stimulation, and then when the oocytes are collected or not collected, we have a phenotype, we have a description of what the oocyte look like, and then we can work too. So it's actually more complicated, which explains why we didn't start earlier to work with this type of patient.
Thank you, Professor. The next question is about, do you screen your 106 genes panel in men with idiopathic non-obstructive azoospermia? And what is your results on the frequency of finding any genetic cause?
Yes, we do screen we do screen all the genes, but according to the phenotype that is sent to us, we just check the genes involved in this phenotype. So I mentioned for the NOAH patient, the spermatogenic failure, we screen we will sequence all the 139 genes. But we will only analyze the 74 genes involved in spermatogenic failure. And answering the end of the question is tricky because we have this panel since a couple of weeks only. So we don't have enough patients to really answer this about the frequency.
Okay, thank you, Professor. The next question is about whether these tests are only diagnostic for us, and how far are we to solutions for gene therapies or gene editing technologies to sort out these genetic mutations, to sort infertility once and for all?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. Maybe my message was not clear enough, but as I say, we start also to have some specific treatment to offer. It's not just a diagnostic tool for at least 3 genes, and maybe more. It also offer a way to what to propose to this couple. So it's a personalized medicine. Concerning the gene therapy, it's very interesting, and it's works that are just starting right now, and we are thinking to develop that also in the lab. And indeed, this gene therapy can be very interesting, and there is some work on mouse showing that you can transfect spermatogonia cells. So let's speak about NOAH patient. So if you have a Sertoli cell only syndrome, you can forget the gene therapy because there is no stem cells, spermatogonia stem cells. But for patients having spermatogonia stem cells, you can think to transfect the gene into these spermatogonia stem cells in vivo, directly in vivo. There's a long way before we arrive to that in human, but there is some work starting on mouse. And you can think to transfect not the gene by itself because it may integrate to the DNA, which you don't want that. But you can transfect either the mRNA, which will allow the production of the missing protein, or you can think to inject directly the protein eventually into the spermatogonia stem cells, hoping to restore the spermatogenesis. The interest of that is that you don't need, like for other disease, you don't need a life treatment. You need to ensure 1 or 2 spermatogenic cycles. And if you are able to do 1 spermatogenic cycle, if you get enough spermatozoa, you can use them fresh, or you can also think to freeze them in order to be able to carry on different ICSI procedure. So I don't think, or we are far from that, but we are even farthest to completely restore a normal spermatogenesis. But I think if we can already restore enough spermatogenesis to clearly preserve few spermatozoa, I mean 1,000 of spermatozoa, it will be a great deal already, and it would be very nice to be able to offer that to our patient.
Hopefully we will come to that point in the future, hopefully. Following up, I got a question.
You can think, if I can add something, you can also think, since you are doing, for most of these patients, you are doing a biopsy, a testicular biopsy, you can also think of a way that part of this biopsy will be used to grow it in vitro, to transfect it with the missing gene, and then to collect in vitro the spermatozoa. That is it's also an option that can be interesting to think of.
That will be more than enough, basically. Following up, I got a question as well. How would you say that your work may be translated into pharmacogenetics for the drug companies to target specific proteins and maybe hope to, let's say, produce sperm or maybe make them faster? How would you comment on that?
This is also a tricky question, because there is part of the question I don't know how to answer, is the economical part. Because I know that if economically there is not enough patient to be treated, the companies will not invest in that. So I think the genetic treatment of infertile patients, especially because there is no dominant gene, will never interest any pharmacological company. But as you mentioned earlier, the interest of this work, and actually we are not working on that, is the development of a contraceptive. Okay, knowing this gene, especially I think the one involved in teratosospermia after the meiosis. I think it's very dangerous to touch the meiosis process. But after the meiosis, the spermiogenesis, the formation of the spermatozoa, is a very good target to eventually develop a contraceptive. Because if you are able to produce acrosome-less spermatozoa, the patient will be infertile. But then if you don't touch the DNA, which is very important, because if you go to the meiosis, you may touch the DNA. But if you go to the spermiogenesis, if you stop the treatment, you can expect that the patient will find back normal spermatozoa with, for example, and it's just an example, there is no other target that can be think of. So if you target the acrosome, it will reproduce an acrosome and be fertile again. So there is a lot of patients that can be treated, and eventually the pharmaceutical companies could be interested to put some money on that.
And they worth probably billions, any of
yeah.
modalities.
Yeah, you have to think of the fact that males doesn't like to be that we touch their fertility.
I can imagine. So I will be asking millions and millions of questions about those, but I think we may be short of time. So I'm going to ask the next question. How much of the genetic causes can we theoretically cover with the panels at the moment?
Say it again, sorry.
How much of the genetic causes can we theoretically cover with these gene panels at the moment?
I cannot answer this question. I will tell you why. First, we need to. There's two reasons why. So at the moment I cannot answer to this question. First, it's an excellent question, but first, as I say, for this large, which is a large panel, 139 genes is a large panel. We have only a couple of weeks of experience. And second, we don't know for the moment how many genes are involved in the fertility phenotype. So when we know how many genes are involved, maybe it will be easier to answer. But I can also give you a more specific answer. For some of the phenotype, and globosospermia, we know that about 75% we will find a mutation. In macrocephalia, in about 100% we will find the cause, the genetic cause. In MAF syndrome, as I say, it's about 60%. But because there is some dominant genes, and for the moment for the spermatogenic failure, azoospermia and oligospermia, there is no dominant gene, and I don't think there will be one. Otherwise, there will be a really dominant one. Otherwise, it will have been identified already. So the first genes that you identify when you do research in genetics are the dominant genes, the ones that are the most frequently mutated.
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Gülekli, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I thank you very much, Stephane, for your nice presentation, and we were very lucky to get the information from author like yourself. I'd like to thank you so much once more, and now I'm going to turn in Turkish and say thank you to my colleagues. Thank you very much again, Stephane.
I'd like to thank you. It was a pleasure, and I have a great pleasure to work with all of you, and I hope it will go on.
Thank you. Sevgili meslektaşlarım, sevgili katılımcılar, hepinize bu akşam için teşekkür ediyorum. Önümüzdeki hafta 5 Haziran'da yine Üreme Tıbbı Derneği'nin bir başka aktivitesi olan webinarımızda buluşmak üzere. Sevgili Halil Russo kardeşime ve siz değerli katılımcılara teşekkür ederek bu akşamı kapatmak istiyorum. İyi akşamlar hepinize.
Çok teşekkür ederiz. Thank you very much, Stephane.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon. Bye bye.
Hope to see See you soon. Bye-bye.